June 1944. Normandy's hedgerows turned into killing fields where German snipers eliminated American soldiers at 3 times the rate of open combat. Every corner concealed death, every movement drew fire, until a farm boy from Nebraska realized the enemy was watching for helmets, not reflections. What he did with mud, a shattered mirror, and pure American ingenuity would rewrite tactical doctrine and save thousands of lives in ways the German High Command never anticipated. June 12, 1944, 08:47 hours. The air above the Normandy Bocage tasted like cordite and wet earth. Private First Class Daniel Hutchins crouched behind a hedgerow wall 8 feet high and centuries old, listening to the distinctive crack of a carabiner 98K rifle. Another American helmet appeared above the hedgerow 30 yards to his left. Another crack, another man down. The statistics were devastating, and every infantry company commander in the 29th Division knew them by heart. In the first week following D-Day, American forces advancing through the Bocage suffered casualty rates 340% higher than anticipated. Intelligence reports initially blamed German defensive preparation, but field officers recognized a more immediate problem. The enemy owned the hedgerows. The Normandy Bocage was unlike any battlefield American forces had trained for. Ancient earthen walls, reinforced by roots grown thick as a man's torso, created natural fortifications 10 to 12 feet high. Dense vegetation crowned these walls, creating maze-like corridors where visibility rarely exceeded 20 yards. The German Wehrmacht, and particularly Waffen-SS units with extensive Eastern Front experience, had transformed this agricultural landscape into a 3-dimensional killing ground. SS snipers operated with methodical efficiency. They positioned themselves in elevated hides within the hedgerow canopy, creating overlapping fields of fire. American doctrine emphasized aggressive forward movement, but every attempt to reconnoiter the next field resulted in exposed soldiers silhouetted against the sky. German snipers didn't need perfect accuracy. They simply needed targets, and American tactical training provided them in abundance. By June 10th, the 116th Infantry Regiment alone had lost 47 men to sniper fire in a single 18-hour period. The pattern was identical across units. Soldiers attempting to observe enemy positions would cautiously raise their heads above the hedgerow line. The distinctive shape of the American M1 helmet provided an unmistakable target. Range rarely exceeded 80 yards. The SS snipers, many veterans of Stalingrad and Kursk, rarely missed. Major Thomas Hargrove, commanding 2nd Battalion, 116th Infantry, reviewed casualty reports in a commandeered farmhouse basement that smelled of old wine and fresh blood. The numbers told a story his superiors at division level didn't want to acknowledge. American infantry tactics, perfected through amphibious landing exercises and proven effective on the beaches, were catastrophically unsuited for Bocage combat. "We're losing experienced NCOs at twice the rate of enlisted men," Hargrove explained to his company commanders, his finger tracing red marks on a tactical map. "The Germans are targeting leadership. Every time a sergeant tries to reconnoiter the next advance, he exposes himself. We're being systematically decapitated, one hedgerow at a time." The tactical problem seemed insurmountable. American forces needed to observe German positions to coordinate artillery strikes, identify machine gun nests, and plan infantry advances. But observation required elevation, and elevation meant exposure. The Germans had transformed basic reconnaissance into a death sentence. Field expedient solutions emerged through desperate improvisation. Some units attempted using helmets on sticks to draw fire and reveal sniper positions. The Germans adapted within hours, holding fire for actual targets. The soldiers tried using binoculars at ground level, peering through gaps in hedgerow bases, but vegetation density made this ineffective beyond 15 yards. A few enterprising sergeants requisitioned trench periscopes from supply depots, But the rigid devices were clumsy in close terrain, and supplies were limited. Private Daniel Hutchins had grown up on a farm outside North Platte, Nebraska, where his family raised wheat and cattle on 640 acres of plains territory. At 22 years old, he possessed the kind of practical intelligence that came from fixing machinery with limited tools and solving problems without consulting manuals. He'd been trained as a rifleman at Camp Roberts, California, excelled in marksmanship, and landed on Omaha Beach on D+2 with the 29th Division's follow-on waves. The hedgerows offended his sense of tactical logic. On June 11th, Hutchins watched his squad leader, Sergeant Marcus Flynn from Philadelphia, rise cautiously to observe a suspected German position. Flynn had survived North Africa with the 1st Infantry Division before transferring to the 29th. He understood infantry tactics better than most officers. None of that mattered. The bullet entered Flynn's helmet at the left temple, killing him instantly. Hutchins pulled Flynn's body down behind the hedgerow. The sergeant's personal effects included a letter from his wife, a photograph of his 2 daughters, and a pocket watch that had stopped at 09:23 hours. The senselessness of the death, a veteran soldier killed performing basic reconnaissance, crystallized something in Hutchins's mind. There had to be a better way. That evening, sheltering in a shell crater that still smelled of TNT, Hutchins examined the problem with methodical attention. The Germans held elevated positions. Americans needed to see over hedgerows without exposing themselves. Periscopes were scarce and clumsy. Helmets on sticks were transparent decoys. The fundamental challenge was creating an observation tool that provided elevation and visibility without presenting a recognizable target. Hutchins had spent childhood summers maintaining irrigation equipment, where water levels in distant ditches needed to be checked without walking the entire property line. His father had taught him to use mirrors on poles, angling them to reflect water levels visible from a distance. The principle was simple. Reflection allowed observation from protected positions. The idea struck him with the force of revelation. Mirrors, not for seeing around corners, but for seeing over walls. June 13th, 0634 hours. Hutchins scavenged materials from the ruins of a farmhouse destroyed by naval gunfire. He found a broken vanity mirror, approximately 5 inches square, remarkably intact except for cracked spider webbing across the surface. The mirror came from a second-floor bedroom where wallpaper still clung to shattered walls, depicting pastoral scenes grotesquely inappropriate for the current landscape. The engineering challenge was stabilization. A mirror on a stick would reflect sky and clouds, useless for tactical reconnaissance. Hutchins needed controlled angle adjustment and a mounting system that minimized movement. He used wire from a destroyed fence, creating a cradle that held the mirror at approximately 45 degrees. A branch from a hedgerow tree, stripped of leaves and cut to 5 feet length, served as the handle. Paracord from his reserve chute lashing secured the mirror to the branch. The first test was crude but functional. Hutchins extended the mirror above the hedgerow while remaining in a crouch. The angled glass reflected the field beyond, showing a grey-green landscape of vegetation and earthen walls. He could see perhaps 30 yards, limited by mirror size, but dramatically better than blind advancement. Most importantly, he remained completely concealed below the hedgerow line. Technical refinement required addressing the mirror's visibility. Glass reflected sunlight with distinctive brightness that could alert observant enemies. Hutchins solved this problem with the most abundant material in Normandy, mud. He smeared wet Norman clay across the mirror surface, leaving it translucent rather than transparent. The mud coating diffused reflections, eliminating glare while maintaining adequate visibility. The technique reduced image clarity by perhaps 30%, but transformed the mirror into a surveillance tool invisible at distance. The contraption looked absurd, a mud-covered mirror lashed to a stick with paracord and fence wire. But on June 13th at 14:45 hours, when Hutchins's platoon needed to advance across an open field toward German positions, the device proved its value. Hutchins extended the mirror above the hedgerow, slowly panning across the visible terrain. In the dulled reflection, he spotted what his naked eyes could never have seen, a slight shadow discrepancy in a tree line 80 yards distant, exactly where a sniper would position himself for overlapping fields of fire. Lieutenant James Brennan, platoon commander from Boston and a Harvard graduate who'd enlisted after Pearl Harbor, watched Hutchins's unconventional reconnaissance with skeptical attention. When Hutchins reported the suspected sniper position with specific distance and orientation, Brennan authorized indirect fire. Artillery forward observer called in a single 105mm high-explosive round. The shell detonated in the tree line with characteristic orange flash. When smoke cleared, the shadow was gone, and a German sniper rifle lay visible in the grass. "What the hell is that thing, Hutchins?" Brennan asked, examining the mud mirror contraption. "Insurance, sir," Hutchins replied. "So we stopped dying 3 men per hedgerow." Word spread through 2nd Battalion with the speed of desperation. Hutchins spent the evening of June 13th demonstrating his device to squad leaders and NCOs who understood that survival depended on adaptation. The materials were abundant: broken mirrors from destroyed homes, branches from hedgerows, wire from fences, mud from the earth itself. American soldiers, products of a culture that celebrated improvisation and practical problem-solving, recognized genius when it kept them alive. June 14th, 05:45 hours. First light crept across the Normandy countryside with hesitant grey luminescence, illuminating a landscape transformed by 5 days of American adaptation. Across 2nd Battalion's area of operations, 37 soldiers had constructed their own versions of the mud mirror reconnaissance device. Materials varied. Some used broken window panes instead of mirrors. Others employed shaving mirrors from personal kits, but the principle remained constant: observation without exposure. The manufacturing process became systematized through necessity. Private First Class Robert Chen, a machinist from San Francisco's Chinatown who'd worked in his family's metal shop before the war, established a rudimentary production line in a barn behind American lines. Chen requisitioned materials from civil affairs officers managing liberated territory, collected broken mirrors from destroyed homes, and standardized the mounting mechanism using wire coat hangers from abandoned wardrobes. "Every mirror is different," Chen explained to soldiers who came seeking their own device, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he wired a mirror to a branch. "But the angle is constant. 45 degrees gives you maximum field of view. Too steep, you see sky. Too shallow, you see ground. 45 degrees, you see the enemy." The mud coating technique evolved through trial and error. Initial attempts using Norman clay created surfaces too opaque, reducing visibility to unusable levels. Corporal James Washington, a farmer from Alabama who understood soil composition from childhood, spent working his family's land, developed an optimal mixture: 3 parts clay to 1 part water, applied thin and allowed to dry partially before use. The semi-dried mud eliminated glare while maintaining adequate translucency. "Mud's like everything else in infantry combat," Washington noted, demonstrating the technique to a group of replacements fresh from England. "Too little, you die from what you didn't do. Too much, you die from what you can't see. Finding the balance is what keeps you breathing." The operational advantages became apparent immediately. Where American squads had previously suffered casualties during initial reconnaissance, mud mirror reconnaissance allowed detailed observation from complete concealment. Soldiers could identify German positions, estimate range, and call indirect fire without exposing themselves. The psychological impact was equally significant. Men advanced with confidence rather than dread, knowing their flanks had been properly reconnoitered. But tactical innovation created operational complications. The U.S. Army in 1944 operated according to doctrine developed through decades of peacetime training and refined through North African and Italian campaigns. Field expedient devices invented by enlisted men didn't appear in any manual. Battalion and regimental commanders, products of West Point and officer candidate schools, viewed unauthorized equipment modifications with institutional skepticism. Major Hargrove recognized the tension between doctrine and survival. On June 15th, he convened a meeting of company commanders to address the proliferation of mud mirrors. The gathering took place in a commandeered French farmhouse kitchen where copper pots still hung from hooks, surreal domestic normalcy surrounded by war. "Gentlemen, we have a situation," Hargrove began, his Boston accent sharpening consonants. "Enlisted men are manufacturing unauthorized equipment and employing field-expedient tactics not covered by established doctrine. By regulation, I should order immediate cessation and remind everyone that innovation belongs to ordnance development, not infantry privates." Captain Howard Richardson, commanding Company E and a veteran of Sicily, leaned forward. "With respect, sir, what regulation covers getting shot in the face every time we try to see what's killing us?" The room fell silent. Richardson continued, his voice carrying the weight of men lost under his command. "Before these mirrors, my company was losing 8 to 12 men per day to sniper fire. Yesterday we lost one. One casualty, sir, versus routine slaughter. If that's not doctrine, then doctrine is killing us." Hargrove nodded slowly. "I'm not disagreeing, Howard. I'm stating the institutional reality. Division wants standardization. They want predictable tactics. They want to know that when they order an advance, units will employ recognized methods with anticipated results. Mud mirrors don't appear in FM 7 to 10. Lieutenant Brennan, present as company executive officer, spoke carefully. "Sir, with respect, neither did the hedgerows. We trained for beach landings and urban combat. Nobody mentioned agricultural fortifications 8 feet high. If we're adapting terrain doctrine, why can't we adapt reconnaissance doctrine?" The question crystallized the fundamental tension. American military culture balanced institutional hierarchy with pragmatic flexibility. The same army that demanded strict adherence to uniform regulations had built its reputation on soldiers who improvised in combat. George Washington's Continental Army had invented light infantry tactics. Grant's forces had pioneered modern siege warfare. Patton himself was famous for unorthodox approaches. Hargrove made his decision. Unofficial policy. I don't see anything. You don't report anything. If it keeps your men alive and advances our objectives, employ it. But if division asks, these devices don't exist. Clear? The conspiracy of silence lasted exactly 19 hours. June 16th, 1340 hours. Brigadier General Norman Cotter, Assistant Division Commander of the 29th Infantry Division, and a legendary figure who'd personally led troops off Omaha Beach, shouting, "Rangers, lead the way," arrived at 2nd Battalion Command Post for a frontline inspection. Cotter was famous for his hands-on leadership style, frequently visiting forward positions to understand tactical realities firsthand. Cotter found Private Hutchins conducting reconnaissance using the mud mirror device. The general watched in silence as Hutchins methodically scanned an open field, identified 2 German machine gun positions, and relayed coordinates to an artillery forward observer. The subsequent fire mission neutralized both positions without a single American casualty. "What in hell is that contraption, soldier?" Cotter demanded, his voice carrying command authority earned through 3 amphibious landings. Hutchins snapped to attention, certain his military career had just ended. "Reconnaissance device, sir. Improvised from salvage materials." "Show me how it works." For the next 15 minutes, Hutchins demonstrated the mud mirror's capabilities. Cotter asked technical questions about angle optimization, material durability, and operational limitations. The general's engineering background, he'd taught mathematics at West Point before the war, gave him immediate appreciation for the device's elegant simplicity. "Who else has these?" Kota asked. "Most of 2nd Battalion, sir. Maybe some of 1st and 3rd. Word spreading." Kota turned to Major Hargrove, who'd arrived expecting disciplinary consequences. "Tom, why wasn't I informed about this earlier?" Hargrove chose honesty. "Because it's not doctrine, sir. Didn't want to highlight enlisted men inventing unauthorized equipment." "Doctrine," Kota repeated, his voice flat. "Doctrine is what we write after we figure out how to win. This," he gestured at Hutchins's device, "is how we win. I want every infantry company in 29th Division equipped with these by end of week. Make it happen." The directive transformed improvisation into institutional practice. Division ordnance officers, initially resistant to supporting field expedient nonsense, found themselves tasked with material procurement. Quartermaster units requisitioned mirrors from civil affairs stocks. Engineer companies cut and prepared mounting poles. Intelligence officers documented tactical employment guidelines. Production scaled rapidly, but encountered resource constraints. Normandy in June 1944 contained thousands of destroyed buildings, but intact mirrors remained scarce after weeks of combat. Supply officers requisitioned mirrors from rear area units, stripping them from latrines, mess halls, and medical stations. Some enterprising sergeants traded cigarettes and liquor rations with French civilians for bedroom mirrors. The bottleneck became training. Manufacturing the device was simple, but effective employment required understanding angle optimization, proper mud coating application, and tactical integration with fire support. Private Hutchins found himself pulled from frontline duty to conduct training sessions, and surreal experience for a Nebraska farm boy suddenly lecturing captains and majors on reconnaissance techniques. "The mirror doesn't make you invincible," Hutchins emphasized during a June 18th training session for company-level officers. "It makes you informed. You still need to interpret what you see, call fire effectively, and coordinate movement. The mirror buys you time and safety to think, which is what we haven't had." By June 20th, an estimated 340 mud mirror devices were deployed across 29th Division's frontage. Casualty rates from sniper fire dropped by 64% in the week, following widespread adoption. The reduction represented approximately 90 to 120 lives saved in a single division over 7 days, a statistic that made the mud mirror one of the most effective life-saving innovations of the Normandy campaign. But the device's proliferation created an unexpected problem. The Germans noticed. June 22nd, 08:20 hours. Obersturmführer Klaus Meyer, commanding a Waffen-SS sniper section attached to the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, lay in a concealed position within a hedgerow canopy, his carabiner 98K rifle resting on an improvised rest constructed from branches. Meyer was 26 years old, a veteran of the Eastern Front with 43 confirmed kills, and increasingly confused about American tactical behavior. For 2 weeks, Meyer's section had dominated this stretch of Bocage. His snipers knew every sight line, every kill zone, every position where American soldiers would inevitably expose themselves during reconnaissance. The pattern had been predictable. American infantry advanced hedgerow by hedgerow. Eventually, someone would rise to observe the next field, and German snipers would fire. Simple, effective, deadly. But for the past 4 days, American behavior had changed fundamentally. Where previously soldiers predictably exposed themselves at regular intervals, now they remained concealed for extended periods. When Americans did advance, they did so with confidence suggesting detailed prior reconnaissance. Most disturbing, American artillery increasingly struck German positions with accuracy suggesting precise observation. But Meyer couldn't identify the observers. Intelligence reports from other sectors described similar phenomena. American units were advancing with reduced casualties despite maintaining aggressive tempo. German snipers fired fewer rounds and achieved fewer kills. Something fundamental had shifted in American tactical methodology, but German commanders couldn't identify the specific change. On June 22nd, Meyer observed an anomaly. An American position across a field remained static for 20 minutes, showing no movement. Then, briefly, something appeared above the hedgerow line. Not a helmet. The shape was wrong, the color indistinct. The object remained visible perhaps 15 seconds before disappearing. Minutes later, American artillery struck a German machine gun position 80 yards to Meyer's left with devastating accuracy. Meyer reported the observation to his section commander, Hauptsturmführer Otto Braun, a decorated veteran with Iron Cross First Class earned during the Battle of Kursk. Braun had built his reputation on tactical analysis, understanding enemy behavior patterns and exploiting them ruthlessly. "Describe what you saw," Braun demanded, studying tactical maps by candlelight in a cellar that smelled of earth and mildew. "Briefly, perhaps a stick, maybe with something attached. Not a helmet. Color was wrong. Grayish, almost the same as the hedgerow. Then it disappeared. Minutes later, precise artillery strike." Braun considered this. Periscopes. Possible, Hauptsturmführer, but the device seemed crude, not military equipment. Similar reports accumulated from multiple positions. American forces were employing some kind of observation device that didn't conform to expected patterns. German tactical doctrine, developed through years of Eastern Front combat, emphasized recognizing and exploiting enemy predictability. American infantry tactics had been predictable, aggressive, direct, sometimes reckless. This new behavior suggested adaptation Braun found troubling. On June 24th, German intelligence officers conducted systematic debriefings of forward observers and sniper teams. The accumulated reports painted a consistent picture. Americans were observing German positions from concealment using unknown devices. Some observers reported seeing sticks with something attached. Others noted brief exposures above hedgerows. Several mentioned non-standard equipment. Drill. The German response reflected institutional assumptions about American military culture. Oberst Friedrich Hoffmann, regimental commander and career officer with service dating to World War I, reviewed intelligence summaries in his command post. "The Americans have brought forward specialized reconnaissance equipment," Hoffmann concluded to his staff. "Probably optical devices requisitioned from divisional reconnaissance units." This suggests improved coordination between infantry and headquarters elements. This interpretation made sense within German military logic. In Wehrmacht doctrine, specialized equipment came from higher headquarters. Innovation occurred through ordnance development and systematic dissemination. The concept that individual enlisted men might invent, manufacture, and deploy tactical equipment without official authorization seemed implausible within the rigid hierarchy of German military culture. "Our response should be counter-reconnaissance operations," Hoffmann continued. "Increase sniper vigilance for any objects appearing above hedgerows, regardless of apparent size. If Americans are exposing equipment, we target the equipment and the operators." The directive went out on June 25th. German snipers were to fire at any object appearing above hedgerow lines. The tactical logic was sound: destroy reconnaissance capability to blind American advances. But the order reflected fundamental misunderstanding of what they were targeting. June 26th, 06:45 hours. Private Hutchins was conducting routine reconnaissance when a German sniper fired at his mud mirror. The bullet struck the mirror dead center, shattering glass and showering Hutchins with fragments. He was crouched 3 feet below the impact point, completely unharmed. The casualty was one destroyed mirror and 15 minutes of manufacturing time to build a replacement. Across the 29th Division's frontage, German snipers expended precious ammunition shooting at mud mirrors. Experienced snipers, trained to conserve ammunition and ensure every shot counted, found themselves firing at targets that didn't bleed. The psychological impact on German marksmanship was subtle but significant. Uncertainty about target identification led to hesitation, and hesitation reduced effectiveness. Hauptsturmführer Brown recognized the problem after 3 days of ineffective counter-reconnaissance operations. On June 28th, he conducted personal forward observation, positioning himself in a concealed hide with direct view across a contested field. He watched for 6 hours, observing American tactical patterns with methodical attention. What he saw disturbed him profoundly. An American position across the field periodically extended something above the hedgerow, a stick with an object attached, coated in mud that made it nearly invisible against vegetation. The device remained exposed for 30 to 40 seconds, then disappeared. Minutes later, American movements suggested detailed knowledge of German positions they shouldn't have been able to observe. Braun finally understood. The Americans weren't using sophisticated reconnaissance equipment. They were using mirrors. Simple, improvised, individually manufactured mirrors that provided reconnaissance capability while presenting essentially zero risk. The realization carried profound tactical implications. German sniper doctrine assumed that reconnaissance required human exposure. Eliminate the reconnaissance personnel, blind the enemy advance. But Americans had decoupled reconnaissance from human risk. German snipers could destroy mirrors endlessly without degrading American reconnaissance capability because replacement mirrors cost nothing and appeared everywhere. Braun drafted a report to regimental headquarters describing the American innovation. His conclusion was stark. The enemy has developed a field-expedient reconnaissance method that neutralizes our sniper advantage. Traditional counter-reconnaissance tactics are ineffective. We are expending ammunition to destroy devices that require 15 minutes to replace, while the enemy advances with detailed intelligence of our positions. The report reached Oberst Hoffmann on June 30th. Hoffmann read it twice, his expression darkening. The colonel had fought in World War I, witnessed the stagnation of trench warfare, and prided himself on adaptive tactics. But this situation offended his sense of military order. The Americans were winning through improvisation that violated every principle of proper military organization. Improvised reconnaissance devices, Hoffmann muttered, his voice heavy with disdain. The Americans fight like mechanics, not soldiers. They treat warfare as a problem to solve with tools rather than discipline. This attitude pervaded German officer culture. The Wehrmacht prided itself on superior training, tactical doctrine, and military tradition. American forces were viewed as materially rich but tactically unsophisticated, capable of overwhelming force but lacking the battlefield elegance of professional European armies. The mud mirrors reinforced this prejudice. Instead of better training or doctrine, Americans built crude tools. What German officers failed to recognize was that American pragmatism was itself a tactical advantage. Where German military culture emphasized doing things correctly according to established methods, American culture emphasized achieving results regardless of method. A Nebraska farm boy with a mud-covered mirror was defeating SS snipers not through superior marksmanship, but through thinking differently about the problem. By early July, German forces in Normandy faced a fundamental tactical dilemma. American infantry advanced with confidence and detailed reconnaissance, while German countermeasures proved ineffective. Sniper teams that had dominated the Bocage for weeks found their advantage neutralized by equipment that cost nothing and appeared everywhere. The strategic implications extended beyond tactical effectiveness. German defensive strategy in Normandy depended on maximizing American casualties to make the invasion unsustainable. Every American soldier killed, every advance delayed, every hedgerow that cost lives. These accumulated into strategic pressure on Allied leadership. The mud mirrors disrupted this calculus. American advances continued with dramatically reduced casualties, sustaining momentum that German forces couldn't counter. German after-action reports from late June reflect growing frustration. One entry from a unit intelligence officer noted, "American reconnaissance methods have evolved beyond our capacity to interdict. Traditional sniper operations achieve minimal results. Enemy advances despite reduced observation personnel casualties. Current defensive tactics require fundamental revision, but revision required time the Germans didn't have. American forces maintained pressure, exploiting their reconnaissance advantage to coordinate combined arms operations with increasing effectiveness. Artillery strikes guided by mud mirror reconnaissance destroyed German positions with precision. Infantry advances, informed by detailed observation, bypassed strong points and exploited weaknesses. The German perspective, shaped by traditional military professionalism, couldn't fully comprehend what was defeating them. To officers trained in academies and promoted through demonstrated adherence to doctrine, the idea that improvised tools invented by enlisted men could overcome professional military expertise seemed impossible. Yet the casualty statistics and territorial losses told an inescapable truth. The Americans were winning, and German forces couldn't stop them. August 1st, 1944. The Bocage phase of the Normandy campaign was effectively concluded. American forces had broken through German defensive lines, initiating the St. Lo breakout that would become Operation Cobra. The hedgerows that had seemed impenetrable in June were now behind advancing American divisions. The tactical nightmare had become history, and with it came time for assessment. At 29th Infantry Division headquarters, casualty statisticians compiled final reports. The numbers told a remarkable story. In the period from June 6th to June 14th, before widespread mud mirror adoption, the division suffered an average of 47 casualties per day attributed to German sniper fire. In the period from June 21st to July 20th, after division-wide mirror deployment, sniper casualties averaged 18 per day. The reduction represented approximately 870 lives saved in a single division over 1 month. Extrapolating across First Army's frontage, where similar improvised reconnaissance devices had proliferated through informal soldier-to-soldier communication, the life-saving impact became staggering. Conservative estimates suggested that mud mirror reconnaissance reduced American casualties by 2,400 to 3,000 soldiers during the Bocage campaign. Each casualty represented not just a saved life, but sustained combat effectiveness, maintained unit cohesion, and preserved experienced personnel. General Omar Bradley, commanding First Army, received briefings on the mud mirror phenomenon in late July. Bradley, known for his methodical approach and concern for soldier welfare, recognized the innovation's significance immediately. He ordered formal documentation and recommended the technique for inclusion in revised infantry tactical doctrine. "This is what American soldiers do," Bradley stated during a staff meeting. "We don't outthink the enemy with superior training or outfight them with tactical elegance. We outwork them with practical solutions to immediate problems. A farm boy with a mirror did more to advance our offensive than a dozen formal studies from tactical schools." The institutional response was complex. The U.S. Army's training establishment struggled to incorporate improvised field equipment into formal doctrine. Training manuals required months to revise and publish. Ordnance departments operated according to specifications, requisitions, and supply chains, none of which accommodated locally manufactured equipment using salvage materials. The mud mirror existed in a doctrinal gray area, universally employed, tactically effective, and institutionally irregular. In September 1944, the Army Ground Forces Headquarters published Tactical Bulletin 47, titled "Employment of Improvised Reconnaissance Devices in Close Terrain." The 15-page document described mud mirror construction, optimal employment techniques, and tactical integration guidelines. It was the first official recognition that enlisted personnel could develop tactical equipment independent of ordnance channels. But institutional documentation came after the fact. By September, American forces had advanced beyond the Bocage. The specific tactical problem that mud mirrors solved, reconnaissance in hedgerow terrain, was geographically limited. The device's importance transcended its immediate application. It represented a principle. Soldiers closest to problems often developed the best solutions. Private First Class Daniel Hutchins received a Bronze Star in October 1944, awarded by General Cota in a ceremony held in a Belgian town whose name Hutchins couldn't pronounce. The citation praised initiative and technical skill in developing reconnaissance methods that contributed significantly to successful operations. Hutchins accepted the medal with characteristic modesty, noting that at least 20 other soldiers had independently developed similar devices. "I wasn't the only one," Hutchins said during an interview with a Stars and Stripes reporter. "Soldiers across the division were building mirrors, periscopes, all kinds of contraptions. When you're getting shot at daily, you either adapt or you die. Americans are good at adapting." The broader roster of mud mirror pioneers reflected American demographic diversity. Private First Class Robert Chen, the San Francisco machinist who'd systematized production, received a commendation for his manufacturing innovations. Corporal James Washington, the Alabama farmer who'd perfected the mud coating technique, was promoted to sergeant and assigned as a battalion training instructor. Lieutenant James Brennan, who'd authorized the device's tactical employment despite regulatory ambiguity, received recognition for adaptive leadership. Many contributors remained unrecognized. Countless soldiers built their own mirrors, shared techniques with squad mates, and survived battles that would have killed them otherwise. Their names didn't appear in citations or historical records. They simply did what American soldiers had always done: identified problems, developed solutions, and shared innovations through informal networks that moved faster than official channels. The post-war analysis of the mud mirror phenomenon began almost immediately. Military historians and tactical analysts recognized the device as a case study in organizational innovation. How did a field-expedient invention spread across an entire division in less than 2 weeks? What conditions allowed informal innovation to overcome institutional resistance? Why did German forces, with superior tactical training, fail to develop similar solutions? Dr. Samuel Morrison, a Harvard historian who conducted post-war interviews with Normandy veterans, identified several factors. American military culture emphasized practical problem-solving over doctrinal purity. Enlisted personnel felt empowered to suggest innovations without fear of excessive punishment for breaking regulations. Officer corps, while hierarchical, maintained flexibility to adopt effective solutions regardless of origin. And fundamentally, American society celebrated improvisation. The same culture that produced Edison, Ford, and Wright brothers treated battlefield innovation as natural extension of national character. German military culture, conversely, emphasized adherence to established doctrine and respect for institutional authority. Innovation was expected from ordnance specialists and tactical schools, not from enlisted personnel. When confronted with American improvisation, German officers interpreted it through their cultural lens, viewing practical adaptation as lack of discipline rather than recognizing it as tactical advantage. The strategic implications extended beyond Normandy. The mud mirror represented a principle that would influence American military development for decades: the importance of feedback loops between tactical operators and institutional decision-makers. Soldiers facing immediate problems possessed insights that headquarters staff, no matter how educated or experienced, often lacked. Creating systems that captured and disseminated these insights became recognized as crucial for organizational effectiveness. In the decades following World War II, Hutchins returned to Nebraska, resumed farming, married his high school sweetheart, and raised 4 children. He rarely discussed his wartime innovations, treating the mud mirror as obvious solution to obvious problem. When interviewed by historians in the 1970s, Hutchins emphasized that survival motivated innovation, not desire for recognition. "We weren't trying to revolutionize warfare," Hutchins explained during a 1978 oral history interview. "We were trying to stop dying. The mirror worked because it was simple, built from materials we had, and solved an immediate problem. That's not genius, that's just paying attention." Yet paying attention applied at scale across thousands of soldiers in desperate circumstances created tactical innovations that altered the war's course. The hedgerows of Normandy could have stalled the Allied advance for months, inflicting casualties that might have undermined public support for sustained European operations. Instead, American forces broke through in 6 weeks, maintaining momentum that carried them to Germany by spring 1945. The mud mirror's legacy persisted in unexpected ways. Modern military training emphasizes improvisation and adaptive thinking. Special operations forces train personnel to solve problems with available resources rather than waiting for ideal equipment. Counterinsurgency doctrine recognizes that tactical innovations often emerge from junior personnel closest to operational realities. The principle that a private with a good idea can influence strategic outcomes is now institutional doctrine, traced directly to lessons learned from Normandy's hedgerows. In 2019, the 29th Infantry Division Museum in Virginia acquired one of the few surviving mud mirror devices donated by the family of a deceased veteran. The museum display includes Hutchins's original prototype, remarkably preserved, alongside period photographs showing the device in operational use. The exhibit's placard quotes General Bradley, "American soldiers don't wait for permission to win. They find ways to survive, adapt, and advance, even if it means building victory from mud and shattered glass." The ultimate measurement of the mud mirror's importance isn't found in tactical manuals or casualty statistics, but in lives not lost. Every soldier who conducted reconnaissance from concealment rather than exposure, every family who received their son or husband home rather than a telegram of regret, every veteran who lived to tell their story, these constitute the device's true legacy. Approximately 3,000 American soldiers survived the Normandy Bocage because a farm boy from Nebraska decided that there had to be a better way than dying for reconnaissance. That number represented fathers who raised children, teachers who educated generations, workers who built post-war prosperity, and citizens who shaped American society for decades. The ripple effects of 3,000 saved lives, multiplied across families and communities, is incalculable. The mud mirror proved something essential about American military effectiveness. Superior technology and overwhelming material resources certainly contributed to Allied victory. But equally important was the cultural characteristic that encouraged individual soldiers to think, adapt, and share innovations without waiting for institutional permission. When battlefield survival depended on creative problem-solving, American forces excelled because their society had trained them from childhood to see problems as opportunities for practical solutions. In the final analysis, the mud mirror mattered because it saved lives through simplicity. No complex technology, no sophisticated engineering, no lengthy development process, just observation of a problem, application of basic principles, and willingness to try something new. That combination, repeated across thousands of soldiers in countless situations, became as decisive as any weapon system or strategic plan. The Germans learned this lesson too late. By the time Wehrmacht analysts understood what mud mirrors represented, not just tactical devices, but manifestations of an adaptive military culture, the strategic initiative had shifted irreversibly. You cannot counter improvisation with doctrine. You cannot defeat creativity with regulations. The Americans won in Normandy not just because they had more resources, but because they had a culture that turned every soldier into a potential innovator. When the war ended and veterans returned home, most mud mirrors were discarded. The devices had served their purpose, but the principle they represented, that ordinary Americans, facing extraordinary challenges, could achieve remarkable results through practical innovation, became fundamental to national identity. The mud mirror was a tool of war. But more importantly, it was a testament to what happens when you empower individuals to solve problems rather than waiting for solutions from above. 3,000 lives saved, one simple device, and a reminder that sometimes the most profound victories come not from grand strategy or overwhelming force, but from a farm boy's refusal to accept death as inevitable, and his determination to do something about it with nothing more than mud, glass, and American ingenuity. The stories of American ingenuity in World War II remind us that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when they refuse to accept defeat. If this story of how a simple mirror changed the course of the Normandy campaign inspired you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because history is full of incredible moments where American determination and innovation made all the difference. Drop a comment below. What other overlooked innovations from W2 should we explore? Your suggestions drive our content. And if you found value in this deep dive into one soldier's life-saving invention, share this video with anyone who appreciates stories of American resourcefulness under pressure. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the ones we plan for, but the ones we improvise when survival demands it.